Okay, in this unit we're dealing with the relationship between culture and psychology, and in this brief lecture what I want to do is specifically look at the link between culture and personality. So personality are the stable patterns of thoughts, feelings, and action associated with a specific person. There are behavioral, emotional, and cognitive components of this. It was the anthropologist Franz Boas who said that culture, not biology, is what makes people what they are and explains differences between groups. Franz Boas is considered the father of American anthropology, and his student, Margaret Mead, really popularized these ideas amongst the American population. One thing to consider when we're meeting someone from another culture and we find them a little hard to get along with, let's say they're a jerk, is that, sometimes you say, oh, it's their culture, it's a different culture, they're a little aggressive, or a little this, or a little that, because of their culture. And it's important to remember that it may be, but it also could be that in their own culture, they are a jerk. And we need to sort of be able to have a way of framing sort of what is culture and what is personality and how are they related. Now, the Culture and Personality School of American Anthropology with Margaret Mead and Ruth Benedict, both students of Franz Boas, was a response to a social Darwinist view, a view that all cultures evolve in a linear way. So some of the ideas that come out of the Culture and Personality School is that culture is personality writ large and personality is culture writ small. Reference to when we meet someone from another culture, then, what we want to think. Now, there is a plasticity of culture, that culture has a certain amount of malleability that can be changed, but yet there's a certain amount of cultural determinism that if you come from a particular culture, you are a particular way. Another aspect of the Cultural Personality School is the idea that each culture is characterized by a dominant personality type. So Ruth Benedict, in looking at the Plains and Polo Indians, sort of divided the various cultures and they're into sort of Apollonian and Dionysian types. So one of the key things to come out of that is the idea that the culture of a group can be examined through individuals and by studying individuals, and this really has had an impact on anthropology because we still focus on individuals to understand a culture. So one of the things that we tend to think of when we think about personality is gender, that the gender of a person shapes the personality. That if someone is a man, they tend to be more loud, aggressive, maybe even vexatious. A woman will be more kind, polite, nurturing, and this is really bound in American culture. And Margaret Mead did a study in which she looked at this amongst 3 cultural groups in Papua New Guinea. So she looked at the Arapash, in which she found that both the men and the women behaved in feminine ways, in ways that we in the West would consider feminine. Kind, nurturing, not very aggressive. Amongst the Mundugumur, both men and women were masculine, meaning aggressive, goal-oriented, the things that we in our West would associate with being masculine behavior. Finally, the Chimbuli had a sort of reverse situation where the women were masculine, they were aggressive, they were goal-oriented, and the men were, quote, feminine, chatty, and nurturing, and the inverse of what we expect from the West. One of the key works of the Cultural Personality School was Ruth Benedict's book, The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. Now, this is an interesting book because it divides Japanese culture into 2 personality modalities or modes. One, the chrysanthemum, the art and the beauty modality, and the sword, the warrior modality. Now, one of the interesting things about this book is it is a classic in anthropology, and you'll see here it was republished in 1989, but it was originally written in World War II as part of the war effort to understand the Japanese, and sort of an interesting dimension of that is that it was written from afar, from records and other people's ideas, and Ruth Benedict did not go to Japan. So what's wrong with the Culture and Personality School? Well, the ideas were absolutely revolutionary for their time, but some people critique it's too much of focus on the non-material culture, and others is that the critique in that human behavior is not entirely culture. There are some biological aspects of human behavior. Now, in thinking about the cultural aspects versus the biological aspects of culture, I remind you back to Mead's study on culture and gender. And there may be biological dimensions of gender, testosterone affects aggression, but what's very clear from these cases is that these biological tendencies can be and have been in certain cultures culturally modulated, culturally changed, and not to be just exactly what the biological impulse is. And I think this is important in other aspects of understanding the link between culture and personality. So one of the important things to think about is sort of modal personalities. We can say that in each culture there sort of is a modal or a most common personality or a range of personalities that are accepted. And these can be gendered in age, that there are certain sort of expectations for how a man should behave, how a woman should behave, how a young person should behave, how an older person should behave. And one of the ways in which modal personality is sort of taught is through childhood training, that what we're taught in childhood of how to behave in certain situations, of how children should act, or should we lose our temper or not lose our temper, are all parts of that. One real good example is in the Javanese. There's a switch that happens for Javanese boys. When they're really young, under the age of 5, their father is very affectionate and cuddly with them, and when they get about 5 or 6, that relationship becomes cold and distant, and this sort of creates a certain aspect of the sort of modal personality for Javanese men of not expressing a lot of emotion and even being a little suspicious of people. So we've now dealt with then some of the relationships between culture, personality, and biology, and suggesting that these are complicated factors, that acknowledging that there is some individual, some even biological components of personality, but these are framed, modulated, moderated by culture, and that each culture sort of has a baseline of what's acceptable. For example, we in America reward people in, say, customer service lines for being very aggressive and vexatious, and so we kind of reward and are encouraging the personality of the angry person, the person who yells to get what they want. And in other cultures, like in Indonesia, that kind of behavior gets absolutely no response whatsoever, but just kind of a stonewall, emotionless stare.